Star Trek Generations from 1994. This is, of course, the first Star Trek The Next Generation movie, and in my opinion, it's kind of a disaster. It made money, but it had a relatively small budget, so it probably should have made more money. It was almost impossible for it to not be successful. And as far as the quality of the movie itself, I think it's pretty mediocre. And it shouldn't be, because there's some pretty good ideas and themes in this movie. I mean, you got Captain Picard and Captain Kirk in the same movie. The acting is very good. The music is outstanding. The effects are pretty solid. The Enterprise D has never looked better. And yet, to me at least, it turned out to be a fairly depressing, nonsensical mess. And I gotta warn you, this is going to be a deep dive. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, but I can guarantee it's going to be longer than any video I've done so far. A lot longer. I mean, my notes, just looking at them right now, I feel like Wendy Torrance looking at Jack's novel in The Shining. And they might be just as redundant, because this movie has been talked about a lot over the years by a lot of different people. I don't know if I'm going to be able to touch on anything that hasn't already been said, but hopefully I will, and hopefully I can make it worth it for you to stick around till the end. But I guess we'll see. In any case, I think we should just get started. This is a mistake. Star Trek Generations from 1994, directed by David Carson, starring Patrick Stewart, Malcolm McDowell, and William Shatner. The movie opens up on a champagne bottle floating through space, which at first is kind of weird. And the vintage is 2265, which is the same year that Kirk took command of the Enterprise. So that's a nice little reference, I think. And the bottle smashes into a massive ship, which turns out to be the USS Enterprise NCC 1701B in the year 2293. So now it makes a little bit of sense. They were christening the ship. And I'm just glad it went a little bit better than the christening of the Flying Wasp.
Bless this ship and all who sail on her. I christen thee the Flying Wasp.
And the Enterprise B is an Excelsior-class ship. And I like the Excelsior. I know they're almost identical, but I don't love the Enterprise B. They are slightly different. The Excelsior has more of a rounded-off drive section around the deflector dish. And the Enterprise B is more chunky and angular in that area. Kind of has a weird fupa. I know that's completely irrelevant to what I need to be talking about here, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway. In any case, Kirk, Scotty, and Chekhov are coming aboard the Enterprise B to celebrate its maiden voyage. Sort of a passing of the torch situation. You get a lot of that in this movie. And it's funny because Scotty seems to love the ship, even though he hates the Excelsior. I don't know. Maybe he likes the addition of the FUPA. And they get introduced to Captain John Harriman, a.k.a. Cameron Fry. I bet it took a lot of effort for him to show up to work today.
He'll keep calling me. He'll keep calling me until I come over. He'll make me feel guilty. This is ridiculous, okay? I'll go. Shit.
And it's pretty hard to imagine how this guy became captain of any starship, let alone the Enterprise. He does not seem qualified. And Kirk and Chekhov talk to Ensign Demora Sulu, the ship's helmsman. She's Hikaru Sulu's daughter. And Kirk is very proud. He congratulates her and says it wouldn't be the Enterprise without a Sulu at the helm. And Chekhov looks at Demora and says this.
I was never that young.
No? You were younger.
And I think that's an example of good nostalgia. It's not just a reference for the sake of a reference. It reminds you of when Chekhov was this fresh-faced wunderkind, and it shows that time has passed and the characters have grown and changed. So I like that it's this sort of fan-servicey thing, but it furthers the characters, which is good. And Kirk asks, when did Sulu find time for a family? Which is an odd thing for him to say now, because he met Demora Sulu when she was a kid. He knows her. And he knew Sulu had a family. So why is he asking this question now? I guess maybe at the time, Kirk thought he would still have time for a family. Who knows? And Captain Harriman asks everyone to take their seats. And Kirk kind of takes a look at the captain's chair as if to say, this is my seat, bitch. But thankfully, he resists the urge to say that, and he sits next to Chekhov and Scotty. And Harriman asks Kirk if he would give the order to depart. Kirk initially declines, but Harriman insists. And all these news reporters are here, and they're waiting with bated breath for what Kirk is going to say. And he says this.
Take us out.
Ready, good sir.
Brought a tear to my eye.
I'll be quiet.
And that's really funny. It's almost sort of mocking the idea of a catchphrase, because Kirk never really had anything like engage or make it so. But if he does have a catchphrase, it is take us out, because he has said that in the past. And everyone claps like it was this brilliant thing. It's pretty hilarious. And I love how things with pomp and circumstance can still be pretty vapid in the 23rd century. And after an off-screen tour of the ship, Scotty has had it with the reporters. He can literally be seen shooing them away as if they're just a flock of pigeons. It's pretty hilarious. And this little journey is just taking them from Earth to Pluto and back again. Just a quick run around the block, as Captain Harriman puts it. But they receive a distress call from 2 transport ships that are caught in some kind of gravimetric distortion. Vasquez from Aliens reports that the ships are transporting Elorian refugees, and they are 3 light years away. And the Enterprise is the only ship in range. How is that possible? They just left Earth. The solar system is where the vast majority of Starfleet ships are designed, manufactured, and repaired. How are there no ships here? Just for security reasons, there should be Starfleet ships patrolling the solar system. But I guess not. The freshly christened Enterprise B is the only ship in range of a distress call 3 light years away from Earth. And Kirk is restless. Probably because he can't fucking believe that they are the only ship in range. And Tuvok is on the bridge without his Vulcan ears. He must have left them at home. And he reports that they have found the distortion. And it's very dangerous. It's tearing the transport ships apart. Kirk suggests using a tractor beam to pull them out. But they don't have a tractor beam. It won't be installed until Tuesday. Jesus. Well, what was the rush? Why was this ship pressed into service when it's not even ready? Oh yeah, maybe it's because Starfleet apparently has no ships patrolling their territories. That's probably it. And suddenly, one of the transport ships gets destroyed by the distortion. 265 people were on board. And at this point, Harriman asks Kirk for suggestions.
Captain Kirk, I would appreciate any suggestions you might have.
First, move us within transporter range. Beam those people aboard the Enterprise.
What about the gravimetric distortions? They'll tear us apart.
Risk is part of the game. You want to sit in that chair.
Helm, close to within transporter range.
Second, turn that damn thing off.
And he makes a good point, because what else are they going to do? Nothing? And it is maybe a little odd that they are not in transporter range, but they would have been in range for the tractor beam? I mean, that obviously doesn't matter. I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but it's just a little weird to me. And Chekhov asks how big their medical staff is, and Harriman says the medical staff doesn't arrive until Tuesday. Nothing happens on this fucking ship till Tuesday. Till Tuesday. Voices Carry, 1985. Classic. They should have hired this band for this maiden voyage. I'd play some of that song for you, but then YouTube would come to my house and beat the shit out of me, so I can't. Anyway, Scotty says the remaining transport's life signs are phasing in and out of their space-time continuum. And he tries to beam them out just as the transport gets destroyed. but he's only able to get 47 out of 150. And now they have a problem, because the Enterprise is trapped in the fucking anomaly now. Scotty thinks they can use a photon torpedo to disrupt it long enough for them to break free. But they don't have any photon torpedoes.
Load torpedo bays. Prepare to fire. My command.
Captain, we don't have any torpedoes.
Don't tell me. Tuesday.
The ineptitude of Starfleet Command never ceases to amaze. I mean, what else don't they have until Tuesday? Do they have toilet paper? Or is it the 3 seashells? Either way, I'm willing to bet they won't arrive until Tuesday. I'm glad that they didn't get a distress call from a ship that was under attack by an enemy ship. What would they do then? Since they're the only ship in range. But thankfully, Scotty thinks they can use a burst from the main deflector to simulate a torpedo blast. But they have to manually align the deflector arrays, which are on Deck 15. Initially, Harriman volunteers to go, but Kirk stops him.
Wait. Your place is on the bridge of your ship. I'll take care of it. Scotty, keep things together till I get back.
I always do.
So I like that. Kirk finds himself in the captain's chair once again, but he doesn't want it. Or he does want it, but he realizes that his time as captain is over. And he can't keep usurping it from younger captains. So he volunteers to go instead. I don't know why some red shirt can't just handle this. Apparently it has to be a captain. Okay. And I like the exchange between Kirk and Scotty. And the smile by Kirk as he enters the turbolift shows that they've both done this type of thing 100 times. And Kirk manages to get down there and fix the relay. They use the deflector, and they're breaking free of the distortion, but the hull is breached, and it's in the exact part of the ship where Kirk was. Scotty, Chekhov, and Harriman head down there, and Kirk is gone. Seems like he's dead. And by the end of this movie, some of us may wish that he had actually died here, because it's not a bad way for Kirk to go out. He springs into action and does everything he can to rescue people that he's never met before, he doesn't know anything about. It's very much a Captain Kirk moment, in my opinion. And then it jumps to 78 years later, although it doesn't look it. It's a holodeck recreation of the HMS Enterprise, and the crew of the Enterprise D is using it for an elaborate ceremony for Worf. He's being promoted from lieutenant to lieutenant commander. And when it's revealed that this is not actually a mock execution, and it is indeed a promotion, Geordi lets out a yell that sounds like Xena Warrior Princess.
Mr. Worf, I hereby promote you to the rank of Lieutenant Commander, with all the rights and privileges thereto. And may God have mercy on your soul.
And it's kind of funny how in Starfleet you can get a promotion and your duties might not change at all. Like Worf he's a lieutenant commander now, but nothing has changed for him. He still has the same job as the tactical officer and the chief of security. So it really has gained him nothing. And Worf walks out onto the plank. They lower a hat for him to grab. And Riker says he'll never make it. No one ever has. So am I to understand that they do this every time someone gets promoted on this ship? You know, I don't remember them doing this when Troy was promoted to commander. Geordi was actually promoted off-screen twice during the show's 7-year run. So maybe he did this shit? Who knows? Seems like a crazy waste of time, though. And Worf manages to reach it. Never underestimate a Klingon. But Riker tells the computer to remove the plank. So Worf falls into the water. And he's pretty pissed about it. As we know, Worf hates swimming because it's too much like bathing.
Swimming is too much like bathing.
And everyone seems to be having a good laugh about it, but Data is confused. He asks Dr. Crusher why someone falling into freezing water is amusing. And Crusher says this.
Oh, it's all in good fun, Data.
Fun?
Fun.
I do not understand.
You've got to get into the spirit of things. Learn to be spontaneous. Live in the moment. Do something unexpected. Get it?
Got it.
And no one seems to like that. That was apparently not funny. And it's only funny when it happens to Worf, apparently. And I don't know why the water has to be freezing. Do we need that level of realism on the holodeck? And also, you can see Worf and both of his knees appear to have blood on them. Did the stunt double hurt himself? I'd like to know what actually happened there. Anyway, Picard gets a message, and he's frustrated. He says the best thing about life at sea was that no one could reach you. He says this was freedom. Yeah, it was freedom for everyone except for the slaves, and even free crewmen could be lashed or put to death at any moment for disobeying orders or even just making an error in judgment. But sure, it was freedom. And Picard takes a look at the message, and it clearly upsets him. Troy asks if he's all right, and he says he's fine, but he abruptly leaves the holodeck. And then the Enterprise picks up a distress call from a space station called the Amagosa Observatory. They say they're under attack. The Enterprise goes to red alert, and everyone shows up on the bridge in their fucking pirate hunter outfits, which is just hilarious. And this movie looks kind of strange at times. Everything has this weird warm glow to it. I'm not really a fan of it, to be honest. But at any rate, they reach the observatory and everything seems quiet. Any attack that happened must be over by now. But scans show 5 life signs aboard the observatory, which is unfortunate because there should be 19. And Picard orders them to stand down from red alert. And he curtly tells Riker to begin an investigation. So Riker beams aboard with Worf, Crusher, and a few gold shirts, and it's nice to see that everyone has taken the opportunity to change out of their goofy holodeck costumes. And the observatory is all fucked up. There's dead bodies everywhere. They find some dead Romulan soldiers, so there's a clue as to who the attackers were. And they find a survivor, Dr. Tolian Soren, and he looks familiar because he's Malcolm McDowell, and we saw him on board the Enterprise B 78 years ago. He was one of the survivors of the transport ship along with Guinan. And back on the Enterprise, Geordi and Data are talking, and Data is kind of down in the dumps about his social failure with Dr. Crusher. He brings up his emotion chip, which he was able to retrieve from Lore, and it looks like it's gained some weight since then. It's very chunky now. And Data says he's thinking about trying it. He says for 34 years, he has endeavored to become more human. So, we now pretty much know exactly how old Data is. So that's mildly interesting, I suppose, even though Brent Spiner was about 10 years older than that at this time. And Geordi reluctantly agrees to do the honors. You know, maybe they shouldn't be installing new hardware in Data's brain while they're in the middle of responding to a distress call. They were at red alert 15 minutes ago. Romulans are involved. Can we wait until we have some real downtime before we start experimenting? I guess not. And Riker reports to Picard. He says they found 2 dead Romulans on the station, and they were looking for something, but they're not sure what it was. He also tells him that Dr. Soren insists on speaking with Picard as soon as possible. And before Riker leaves the ready room, he tries to find out what's bothering Picard, because something clearly is. But Picard has his shields at full capacity. He basically just tells Riker to get out. And in 10 forward, Data tries out his new emotion chip. Guinan offers him a drink, and although he doesn't realize it yet, he hates it.
Yes, that is it.
I hate this. Data, I think the chip is working.
Oh, yes! I hate this! It is revolting!
More?
Please.
So that's pretty great. I love it. Although I don't know if taste can be linked to emotion. Does that really add up? A bad tasting drink is more like hearing a sound that hurts your ears or a smell that turns your stomach. It's not really an emotional thing. Or whatever. It makes for a funny scene. And Picard shows up to talk to Soren. And he tells Picard that he must return to the observatory immediately. He says years of research is at stake. Picard says he can't allow that until their investigation is complete. And Soren says this.
They say time is the fire in which we burn. Right now, Captain, my time is running out. We leave so many things unfinished in our lives. I know you understand.
So this disturbs Picard, and we'll know why in a few minutes. And Soren takes a look at Guinan and walks out. And I'm a little confused, because Worf said there were 5 life signs on board that station. But Soren seems to be the only person they found. Maybe I missed something. But it's just a little weird to me that they said there were 5 life signs and we never see the other 4. And then Worf tells Riker that the dead Romulan's tricorder was scanning for something called Trilithium, which is apparently a nuclear inhibitor. It can theoretically stop all fusion within a star, which sounds an awful lot like that Tox Utot thing from Captain's Holiday, right? Isn't that basically what that thing was supposed to be able to do? And I guess this Trilithium does it as well. Maybe Trilithium is used in the Tox Utot, who knows? But the Romulans never managed to stabilize it. And I love that Worf is just a Romulan expert. He hates these dudes so much that he's studied up on all their little schemes. Anyway, Data and Geordi beam over to the observatory to scan for Trilithium, and Data can't control his laughter. He's laughing at everything, even jokes that supposedly happened 7 years ago. He laughs himself into a farting fit, at least in my imagination. And then his face turns into stretchy, goofy CGI, and he falls to the ground. Geordi checks on him, and Data says that his emotion chip has overloaded his positronic relay. I don't know what that means, but it sounds pretty bad. And maybe now is a good time for me to address the uniform situation in this movie. It's really bizarre. It's worth noting, I think. Everyone on the Enterprise is wearing a mixture of the TNG-era uniforms and the Voyager and early Deep Space Nine uniforms. A few minutes ago, Data was wearing the Next Generation uniform. Now he's wearing the Deep Space Nine uniform. I'm guessing this is because TNG is obviously over at this point and they had no reason to continue making those uniforms. But it's just really bizarre to see the mixture. It should be one or the other. But I guess they thought this would be better and cheaper, I'm assuming. At any rate, Soren walks in and he knocks out Geordi.
Dr. Soren. Yeah, there seems to be some sort of dampening field in here. It's blocking our comm signal. Can you shut it off for us?
Of course. I'd be only too happy to.
That's assault, brother.
And Data's emotion chip has caused him to be too frightened to do anything about this. Under normal circumstances, this is where the movie would have ended, because an unencumbered Data would destroy Soren. So it really is unfortunate that Data picked today to try out his emotion chip. And that's not a criticism, by the way. I'm just pointing out the inconvenience of it all. And I guess Soren just beamed over to the observatory from the Enterprise undetected. Once again, Security Chief Worf, newly promoted to Lieutenant Commander, is nowhere to be found. And on the Enterprise, Picard is looking through his family photo album. And Troy walks in, and she's concerned about him. I mean, Jesus, it took her long enough. It has to have been hours since he got this bad news. And she certainly could sense it because she was the first person to ask him if he was okay. And yet, she's been doing nothing since then. Picard talks about his brother Robert, and he breaks down when he starts talking about his nephew Rene. Troy asks what happened, and Picard says Robert and Rene burned to death in a fire. Okay, what fire? How did this happen? There's no details at all. We can assume it was at their home in France, but how did they burn to death in a fire? I don't know how that happens in the 24th century. I know Robert was basically a complete Luddite, but I would think that he would be required by law in the 24th century to have fire suppression systems in his house. And failing that, you'd think they could simply be beamed out in the event of an emergency, but apparently not. It's such a lazy way to kill off two established characters. They were fridged, essentially. That's where characters are killed off just to serve as motivation for the main character. And it happens off screen, with zero explanation. And did Robert's wife, Marie, survive? Picard doesn't even mention her. What a mess. And Picard says it's all right. These things happen. Do they? In the 24th century? I guess so. And he goes on to say that he felt as though Renee was about as close as he would get to having a child of his own. And now he's saddened that the Picard family line will likely end with him. That is, at least until this fuckwit shows up out of nowhere in about 30 years. But we don't need to talk about that ever again. And then suddenly, the Amargosa star suffers a quantum implosion. All nuclear fusion is breaking down. A probe was launched into the sun from the observatory a few minutes ago, and I guess no one thought to alert the captain when that happened. Oh well. So the star is going to collapse in less than 5 minutes, and everything in this system will be destroyed by a shockwave. I really hope it's not a populated system, and they realize that Geordi and Data are still on the station, so Worf and Riker beam aboard to retrieve them. They show up and find Soren, and he starts shooting at them. And a Klingon bird of prey decloaks and beams out Soren and Geordi. And then it goes to warp. Riker, Worf, and Data beam back to the Enterprise, and they barely escape.
Commander Riker's team is aboard, sir.
Helm, Warp 1, engage!
And I'm sure that Warp 1 is plenty fast enough, but it still feels a little slow for my comfort level in this situation.
Prepare ship for light speed! No, light speed is too slow! Light speed too slow? Yes, we're gonna have to go right to ludicrous speed!
And it's revealed that Lursa and Bator are in command of the bird of prey, the Sisters of Duras. They were obviously recurring Klingon villains in TNG. Always great to see them, in my opinion. And the first thing Soren does when he sees Bator is smash her in the face. Seems pretty random and unnecessary. And she says, I hope for your sake that you were initiating a mating ritual. I don't know if he was, but I am. Most definitely. Let's see what those fucking eyebrows can do. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Soren is pissed because the Romulans came looking for their missing Trilithium. Apparently, the Duras sisters stole it from them. And they're just lucky the Enterprise showed up when it did. So, the Duras sisters are working with Soren because they want him to develop a Trilithium-based weapon that they can use to conquer the Klingon Empire. Although Soren says that with it they can reconquer the Klingon Empire, which is funny because the Duras sisters never actually conquered it to begin with. All they did was start a civil war that lasted about 5 minutes. And we'll see what Soren is getting out of this arrangement soon enough, because on the Enterprise, Crusher goes over Soren's MySpace page. He's an Elorian, just like Guinan. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think that this is the first time that Guinan's species was given a name, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's significant, I guess. And Soren is over 300 years old. He lost his entire family when the Borg destroyed the Elorian homeworld. Although 300 is probably fairly young for his species, Guinan is at least 500 or 600 years old, as we know from her time rubbing elbows with old Samuel Langhorne Clemens. And Crusher goes on to explain that Soren escaped the Borg along with a handful of refugees on a ship called the Lakul, and they were eventually caught in a strange energy ribbon where they were rescued by the Enterprise B. Riker points out that that is the mission where James Kirk was killed. Crusher also says that Guinan was also among the survivors. So, with this new information, Picard goes to talk to Guinan, and I think this is the first time we see Guinan's quarters, and holy shit, you think she has enough fucking candles? Try not to burn the ship down, will you please? And Picard says he needs to know everything about Soren. He says he's developed a dangerous weapon. Guinan says that all Soren really cares about is getting back to the Nexus. She explains that the energy ribbon is a doorway to another place, and she calls it the Nexus. It's a place that she has tried very hard to forget. She says that the Nexus is like being inside Joy. I don't know who Joy is, but I'd like to meet her sometime. I'll be here all week. Tip your waiter. And she continues and says that she's never been as content as she was when she was in the Nexus. And then suddenly, the Enterprise B beamed them away from the Nexus. She learned to live without it, but obviously Soren hasn't. Guinan goes on to say that if Picard should end up in the Nexus, he won't care about anything. All he'll want is to stay in the Nexus. And we'll come back to that because it's not true, at least for Picard. And it turns out that Data's emotion chip has been fused into his neural net and cannot be removed at this time. Not without Geordi, I'm assuming. But Data is fit for duty, so he joins Picard in stellar cartography, so they can take a closer look at this energy ribbon. And Data is distracted. He feels guilty that he wasn't able to save Geordi. He wants to be deactivated. Picard basically orders him to get a hold of himself, and Data says that he will try. Picard says it takes courage to try, and courage can be an emotion too. So it's nice that he doesn't just yell at him. He offers a little bit more encouragement than that. And Data discovers that the course of the ribbon changed when Soren destroyed the star. Picard wonders why he's trying to change its path. He asks why he doesn't just fly into it with a ship. Data says that records show that every ship that has approached the ribbon has either been destroyed or severely damaged. I mean, what? I'm not saying that's not true. It probably is. But at the same time, Soren was in a ship when he got into the Nexus the first time. This makes no sense. Soren knows how he got into the Nexus the first time. So you'd think that he'd be just fine with flying into it. Then again, I don't know how the Enterprise B could have beamed out the survivors if they were in the Nexus. It seems like they were half in the Nexus and half out of it. I do not get it. It makes zero sense. Either way, he feels as though he can't just go to the ribbon. He's trying to bring the ribbon to him. And its current course takes it close to an M-class planet called Verdian III, but not close enough. Soren will have to destroy the Verdian system's star in order to get the ribbon to Verdian III. And if the star is destroyed, the entire solar system will be destroyed, along with Verdian IV, which is a populated planet. The pre-industrial humanoid society lives there. The contradiction is fascinating, though. Let's just go over it one more time. It's too dangerous to fly into the strange energy ribbon with a ship, because a ship will be destroyed. But it's not too dangerous to bring the ribbon to a planet that will be destroyed. So whether you're on a planet or a ship, it's getting destroyed. Yet, being on the planet is deemed safer. Does that make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me. At any rate, they're obviously heading to the Verdian system at maximum warp. And the bird of prey arrives at Verdian III. Soren tells Lursa and Bator to beam him to the surface, but they want their payment first. So he gives them this fucking hotel room key that has all the information they'll need to create a Trilithium weapon. And then their scans show the Enterprise entering the system. The bird of prey is cloaked, but the Enterprise knows they're there anyway. They receive a hail from Captain Picard, and he tells them that the Enterprise will destroy any probe launched towards the Verdian star. And he also demands Geordi's safe release. Soren says there's no time for this. He tells Bator to eliminate them. She says that's a Galaxy-class starship. They're no match for them. And Soren says it's time to give Mr. LaForge his sight back. And on the Enterprise, Worf says something stupid. He says, according to his calculations, a solar probe launched from either the Klingon ship or the planet's surface will take 11 seconds to reach the sun. But since they don't have an exact point of origin, it will take them between 8 and 15 seconds to lock on with their weapons. So, I mean, obviously this probe is going to be traveling at warp, which I guess isn't that crazy. I mean, photon torpedoes can travel at warp, but it's low warp, and the Enterprise should still have plenty of time to lock on and destroy it. Or whatever. They needed to create a problem so this movie could continue. Lursa and Bator hail the Enterprise. Picard wants to speak with Soren, but they say he's already beamed to the planet's surface. Picard wants his coordinates so he can beam to him, which is weird, because you'd think they would be able to just scan the planet for the only humanoid life form. We'll soon find out why they can't beam to him, but they should still be able to find him on this planet. In any case, Picard offers himself in exchange for Geordi, as long as they beam him to the surface so he can speak with Soren. And Lursa and Bator agree to these terms. So they beam Picard down to the planet, and Geordi arrives safely on the Enterprise. Picard confronts Soren, but he's put up a force field around his work area, so talking is about all they can do right now. And on the Bird of Prey, they've somehow managed to link Geordi's visor to their view screen, so they can see everything that he sees, which is another head-scratching thing, because it's basically just a camera. In other words, they're not seeing how Geordi sees, because we've seen how Geordi sees, and it's more like a predator. So it kind of seems like they just stuck a small camera inside the visor, which you'd think would be detectable, but it is not. And Data apologizes to Geordi for letting him down. He says he hasn't been behaving like himself lately. Geordi agrees. He says he's been behaving like a human. I make fun of Geordi a lot for his romantic debacles, but I really like him in this movie. He's really great. He's a good friend to Data. He never really gets annoyed with him. He just constantly supports him. And I like that. And back on the planet's surface with Picard and Soren, it's a good thing Worf isn't here, because there's a lot of these blue barrels around. And, as we know, he hates those motherfuckers. And Soren tells Picard that this is the only way to get into the Nexus. Except, as I said many times already, it is not the only way. Soren, Guinan, and all those Elorian refugees got into the Nexus because they flew into it with a ship. And Soren goes on to say that time is like a predator. It's stalking you. And in the Nexus, time has no meaning there. The predator has no teeth. I don't know how the fuck he knows that. He was only in the Nexus for a few minutes at most. How does he know he won't age normally and die? I mean, he is right. Time doesn't seem to pass there, but he shouldn't know that for sure. And back on the Bird of Prey, we're bouncing around a lot. Lursa and Bator are super annoyed because in order for their plan to work, they need Geordi to go to engineering and have a look at some vital Enterprise components. But he hasn't gone there yet. They say he bathed, and now he's roaming the ship. So, no wonder they're pissed off. They probably had to look at this dude wash his dick and balls, and they obviously were not impressed. Bator says he's got to be the only engineer in Starfleet who doesn't go to engineering. And it's revealed that the Enterprise sensors can't penetrate the planet's ionosphere. So that's why they can't locate Soren or Picard. Which is yet another thing that doesn't make any sense. The planet is like Earth. It's almost as if it was filmed on Earth. Blue skies, not a cloud in sight. But for some unexplained reason, their sensors can't reach the surface. But despite that, Data is happy to try to scan for life forms.
I just love scanning for life forms. Life forms. You tiny little life forms. You precious little life forms. Where are you?
And I can't decide if I like that or if I hate it. And Geordi finally goes to engineering, and the Klingons get a good look at the shield modulation numbers, which means they can adjust their weapons to match it, and they will be able to bypass the Enterprise's shields completely. So the bird of prey attacks the Enterprise, and there's explosions on the bridge, hull breaches. It makes no sense to me. I understand that the shields are useless right now, but even just the hull should be able to withstand at least some of the incoming fire from this ancient bird of prey. Unless the weapons on it have been upgraded, which I'm going to have to assume is the case. It's just an old ship with modern weapons. But there's still a problem because the Enterprise should be able to just change their shield modulation numbers. Geordi could probably do that in half a second, but they never think to do that. And Riker asks Worf if that old bird of prey has any weaknesses. I mean, it's so silly. Yeah, it's a bird of prey. I can think of a lot of weaknesses. It has weak shields, for one. And Worf says it's a class D12 bird of prey, and they were retired from service because of a defective plasma coil, which is part of their cloaking device. There's so much techno jargon in this movie. It is ridiculous. I mean, you can tell I'm a nerd. I like the ins and outs of Star Trek. I really do. But this is a little much. I mean, there's just so much techno nonsense. And they conclude that an ionic pulse might reset this coil and trigger the cloaking device, which means the bird of prey's shields will drop, and the Enterprise will have only a few seconds to capitalize before the ship is completely invisible. And Bator says, "Fire at will," which I know is a common saying on board a starship in the heat of battle, but it always feels like a personal attack on Riker. And there's another bridge explosion on the Enterprise, and it's a fucking doozy. This dude gets launched up into the air and over the weapons console. What would cause this to happen? Is this ship made out of dynamite? And it actually looks like that was supposed to be Data. If you look at the clip, it looks like Riker's talking to Data and the camera's on Data, and then the explosion happens kind of right where they are. But it's clearly not Data. It's some blonde stunt double. And he's also wearing the wrong uniform. So it can't be Data, but I don't know. It's the placement of how it's shot makes it look like it was supposed to be Data. Anyway, they hit the Klingons with the ionic pulse, and the bird of prey's shields go down. And then this happens.
Fire.
So, rest in peace to the Duras sisters. I always thought they were cool villains. And their death is pretty epic, but I would have liked it more if it happened in a better movie, I think. And Data celebrates with a fist pump.
Yes!
And it's especially funny when you look at the extras in the background, because the guy on the left is smiling way too much. And the other guy doesn't know what to do with himself. He does like a half-hearted fist pump. I mean, it's just hilarious. And I get it. I've never done any acting, except in kindergarten in a play. I played the son. I had no lines. I just stood there with my face sticking through a cardboard picture of a giant sun. And you struggle for things to do when you're basically just a piece of the scenery. But I had it better than this one kid who was playing a tree. The teachers looked at the two of us and basically said, you know what part you guys would be great for? Nothing. You'd be great at standing there doing nothing. So that's what I did. And that's probably what these fucking guys should have done. But they didn't. And it turns out that there's a coolant leak. Always with the coolant leaks on the Enterprise. Am I right? Geordi loves it, though, because he gets another chance to roll under the door in dramatic fashion. He's good at that. And they have 5 minutes until a warp core breach. So Riker orders everyone from the drive section to evacuate to the saucer section as they prepare to separate. Can't they just eject the core? I'm not entirely sure that the Enterprise D can eject the core, but it should be able to. Something that can explode when damaged should always be ejectable. I mean, we know the Enterprise E and Voyager can do it, but who knows? Maybe this is another unfortunate Enterprise D design flaw. Or the ejection systems are offline, which it happens a lot, I guess. Get them online if they're offline. They have 5 minutes. Oh, man. And this is tragic. This ship has survived tons of battles with the Borg, the Romulans, Cardassians, but this super old Klingon bird of prey is what destroys it. It gives me a headache. And the evacuation is chaos. For some reason, there's unattended kids everywhere. I don't know why there's so many kids in the drive section to begin with, but I guess that's where they were hanging out today. One kid drops her teddy bear as Geordi is carrying her. Except she doesn't really drop it. She kind of throws it on the ground. I know I'm really nitpicking this movie to shit, but you just notice these little things that kind of are funny when you're really looking for stuff. And I probably would have been stupid enough to go back for it, because that's how much of a sentimental nitwit I am. Anyway, they get everyone to the saucer section, and the separation is successful. The drive section explodes, and the shock wave pushes the saucer towards the planet. It breaks through the atmosphere, and I don't know why, but it's crashing. The Enterprise can fly in an atmosphere, and yet we're crashing. Troy has taken the helm, and she gets a lot of shit for crashing the Enterprise, but I don't know how it could be her fault. Remember, she's a full commander. She's actually incredibly overqualified for the counseling job that she has. Anyway, the truth is out there. And at the missile site, Picard manages to find a gap in the force field and he crawls through it. He tries to fight Soren, but he gets the shit kicked out of him. And Soren sends him rolling down a hill. Unfortunate. And then the missile launches. It reaches the sun in seconds, just like Worf said, and the energy ribbon comes towards them, and they dissolve into it. And with the destruction of the sun, the planet is also destroyed along with the Enterprise crew. Tragic. They survived the crash for nothing. And Picard finds himself in the Nexus, of course, which means he can have everything he's always wanted. So it's Christmas time, and he's celebrating with an imaginary wife and children. His nephew Rene is also there. It's very bizarre. I get that he would like to have a family, but there's something a little odd about making up a family in your imagination. You know, who is his wife? Who is this woman? If you were to imagine yourself with a spouse that you don't already have, wouldn't it be someone you know or someone you dated? Why is Captain Picard married to a Dr. Quinn medicine woman impersonator? It's just hard to make up a wife in your head. If I had to do it, it would be someone I know or knew in real life. Or failing that, I guess I'd pick, I don't know, Scarlett Johansson? Specifically, Scarlett Johansson in the movie Under the Skin, where she plays a naked alien who lures men into a haunting dark room where she liquefies them. Yeah, that's how your boy wants to go out. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I think my intrusive thoughts would make the Nexus a nightmare. And I believe this is the movie that started the idea that Captain Picard prefers to live in a Charles Dickens novel, because his family, it looks like something out of A Christmas Carol. I mean, it's wild how they're dressed. It doesn't make sense, but I guess that's how he and his family like to look. And Picard notices a bizarre twinkling Christmas ornament, and he realizes that all of this isn't actually happening. And Guinan shows up, sort of. She says she's an echo of the person Picard knows. Apparently, when you leave the Nexus, a part of you stays behind, whatever that means. And Picard seems pleased at the thought of this being his family. And he's about to join them for Christmas dinner, but he decides not to. He goes back into the living room and he talks to the echo of Guinan. And he finds her spinning around on a fucking carousel. There's just a carousel in this house right now. It is wild. And he asks Guinan if he can leave the Nexus. She says time has no meaning here, so he can go anywhere, anytime. So he wants to go to the mountaintop on Verdian III just before Soren destroyed the star. And all of us can see that this is beyond stupid. She just said you can go anywhere, anytime. Why not go back to when Soren was actually on the Enterprise as a guest and kick him in the balls and throw him in the brig? Or better yet, go back to before the house fire killed his brother and nephew and saved them. He could do that and still have plenty of time to arrest Soren or kill him. I mean, I don't know exactly how that would work, because then there would be two Picards. But that's not for me to figure out. Guinan is the one that said any place, anytime. They just wrote themselves into a corner here. And obviously I realize that if they did that, it would negate the entire theme of the movie, about the passage of time, aging, mortality, learning to let go. But don't make it seem like it's an option then. Anyway, Picard goes on to say that he needs help fighting Soren, and he wants Guinan to help. I guess he wants her to do this move on him. I don't know what it does, but it looks pretty scary. And she says she can't leave. She's there already, referring, of course, to the actual Guinan. It's very confusing. But she says she knows someone who can help. And from his point of view, he just got here too. And of course, she's talking about Captain Kirk. Picard finds him outside of a house chopping wood.
Beautiful day.
That's a quotable Shatner line, if there ever was one, in my opinion. And I have no idea how the echo of Guinan knows Captain Kirk, or Picard for that matter. But I guess once you're in the Nexus, the echo of you just knows everything, including who's in it. Or maybe it's just a Nexus tutorial guide that takes on the appearance of Guinan. Who knows? These questions are never answered in the movie. It's also interesting that Kirk's initial fantasy is just chopping wood. Like why is he chopping wood? When he went from the deflector control room on the Enterprise B to chopping wood, why didn't he immediately question it? Instead, he just continued chopping. I guess that's just how much he loves it. And Picard tries to talk to Kirk, but Kirk smells something burning and goes into the house. Turns out to be eggs on the stove. He invites Picard in and says that this is his house, or at least it used to be. He says he sold it years ago. And I guess we can assume he sold it for money. Money that supposedly doesn't exist. And every time Picard tries to explain the situation to Kirk, he gets distracted by something. He notices a clock that he gave to McCoy, his old dog Butler, who has been dead for 7 years from Kirk's perspective. He also hears a woman named Antonia call down to him from the bedroom. He says this isn't the future, this is the past. It's 9 years ago. He says it's the day he told Antonia that he's going back to Starfleet. I'm guessing this part of his life takes place after Star Trek The Motion Picture, but before Wrath of Khan, although I'm not totally sure. And he says he was preparing Katarian eggs in order to break the news to Antonia. Whoever the fuck Antonia is. I mean, we don't even know. And he asks Picard to stir the eggs, and Picard seems to burn his hand, which is interesting. So, you can get hurt in the Nexus, apparently. And Kirk pauses for a moment and says this.
And I'm dead?
Not exactly. As I said, this is some kind of...
The temporal nexus, yes, I heard you.
And I love that. Kirk is like, what is this shit again? Oh yeah, a temporal nexus. Another one of those. He's just so nonchalant about the whole thing, which I think is very Kirk at this point in his life. And then he just accepts it. He says, history considers him dead, so who is he to argue with history? Picard says he has a duty to help. And Kirk says he was out saving the galaxy when Picard's grandfather was in diapers. So history owes him one. He also says that he was like Picard once, so worried about duty and obligation he couldn't see past his own uniform. And that's kind of interesting. Picard and Kirk have almost led opposite lives in a weird way. Picard, when he was young, was this bold, brash guy who probably broke more than a few rules. And later he became this kind of focused, disciplined character that we know. And Kirk was the opposite. He followed the rules for the most part in his youth. He climbed the command ladder. And only later in life did he start to loosen up a bit. So I suppose that's mildly interesting, although not interesting enough for me to make this video even longer by saying it. So I apologize. So Kirk walks up the stairs with the breakfast for his lady friend. And he ends up in his uncle's barn. Now, instead of 9 years ago, it's 11 years ago. This is the day he met Antonia. So he's into it. He says he can start all over again and do things right from day one. He rides out on a horse and jumps a gap. And he realizes finally that this isn't real because he wasn't afraid of the jump. And he always used to be. Picard catches up to him and they see Antonia on a hilltop in the distance. Kirk says she isn't real either. And now Kirk is kind of mentally hulking up in a way. He says this isn't about any regrets or things that he didn't do. It's about that empty chair on the bridge of the Enterprise. Ever since he left Starfleet, he hasn't made a difference. And he tells Picard not to let anyone take him off the bridge of the Enterprise because while he's there, he can make a difference. And Picard tells him to come with him, to make a difference again. And Kirk says this.
I take it the odds are against us and the situation is grim.
You could say that.
You know, if Spock were here, he'd say that I was an irrational, illogical human being for taking on a mission like that. Sounds like fun.
And I think that is the only line from Kirk in this movie that I really have a problem with. Because Spock would not say that. He'd be right there with him at his back as he always has been. The three of them would finish this asshole like he's Stuntman Mike at the end of Death Proof. It would be a massacre. But anyway, Kirk and Picard ride off into a portal that opens up. No idea how they summoned it or anything, it just appears. And they're both back on Verdian III right before Soren beat the shit out of Picard. Except this time, Soren sees Kirk. And when he finds out who he is, he fucking runs away. He looks at James T. Kirk and just leaves. He's got a fucking gun. A gun that looks like it shoots green torpedoes. But he ran away from Captain Kirk.
I have to return some videotapes.
And Kirk says he'll take care of Soren. And he's not kidding. Kirk beats the shit out of Soren. Picard tries to help, but Soren sends him rolling down another hill. It's getting embarrassing at this point. But while fighting Kirk, Soren doesn't even land a single punch on him. This alien scientist, with possibly hundreds of years of hand-to-hand fighting experience, is absolutely no fucking match for a 65-year-old Captain James Tiberius Kirk. And Kirk puts an exclamation point on the whole thing by punching Soren down a mountain. And it looks like his stunt double smashed his fucking head on the side of this cliff. I hope he was wearing a helmet disguised as a wig or something. And while he's hanging there, he takes out a giant remote and cloaks the missile launcher. So, even if Picard reached it, he wouldn't be able to see the controls in order to deactivate it. I mean, Jesus, this fucking guy thought of everything, didn't he? He put a giant force field around this thing, but he said, no, that's not enough. I might need to make it invisible. But fortunately, he drops the remote, and it lands on a bridge. So he shoots the bridge so that Picard and Kirk can't reach it, at least not easily. And Kirk tells Picard to get to the launcher while he goes for the remote. He carefully crosses the bridge, and he grabs the remote, and he decloaks the launcher. And it's maybe a little convenient that he just knows how to use tech that is 78 years more advanced than he's used to. Be kind of funny if he just accidentally launched the missile or something. Oops. And unfortunately, the bridge that Kirk is on collapses, and it falls. I don't think he's going to be able to shoulder roll his way out of this one. And Picard rigs the missile's locking clamps so they won't disengage, and he runs off. Soren tries to fix it, but it's too late. It's about to explode. So the dude who is seemingly terrified of facing his own death is now forced to face it. And the missile blows up and kills Soren. And I'm a little confused because this thing is designed to stop all nuclear fusion in a star. And yet, if it blows up on a planet, it's nothing more than a glorified popcorn fart? I mean, maybe Picard disabled the Trilithium somehow? Who the fuck knows? Moving on. Picard rushes down to where Kirk fell and finds him alive but dying. He asks Picard if they did it, if they made a difference. Picard says yes. And then this happens.
It was fun. Oh my.
So it's a really sad scene. It's the death of Captain Kirk. It's well acted for the most part. The oh my might be a little bit much, but it definitely conveys his passing. And somehow Picard buries Kirk under some rocks. It doesn't look like this is near where the bridge collapsed, so he somehow got him out from under the wreckage and carried him to another location on this mountaintop and buried him under some rocks, which is not a great way to bury him. There's going to be alien mountain lions ripping him to shreds in about an hour. And in Picard's log, he says 3 Starfleet ships have arrived in orbit to help beam up the Enterprise survivors. But unfortunately, the ship itself cannot be salvaged. I wonder if he told anyone that Captain James Kirk's body is down there. Like, did he take all the credit for defeating Soren? Or did he mention Kirk in his report? Who knows? And Data and Troy are sifting through the wreckage of the Enterprise, and he tells her that he's becoming used to his emotion chip, that his feelings will no longer control him. But then he finds Spot alive and well, and Data starts crying, tears of joy. But he's confused. He wonders if the chip is malfunctioning, but Troy says it's working perfectly. And this is how you know Brent Spiner is a great actor, because he famously hated all the scenes he had with Spot. And Riker and Picard are also searching through the wreckage, and it's kind of funny because Picard picks up the Kurlan Nexus that Professor Galen gave to him. He used to be all about that fucking thing, but he couldn't care less about it now. Professor Galen's ghost must be real pissed. Nah, I always knew you were a shithead, Mr. Picard. And Picard finds his family album, which I guess is all he really cares about. I'm also guessing that his fish are dead. Tragic. And Picard reflects on what Soren said to him about time being a predator. And then he says this.
I rather believe that time is a companion who goes with us on the journey, reminds us to cherish every moment, because it'll never come again. What we leave behind is not as important as how we've lived.
It's a nice sentiment. I'm not sure I totally agree with it, but I'd like to. And they beam up, and the 3 Starfleet ships go to warp. And that's the end. And I love how the Oberth class came to help. Like, who the fuck are they evacuating with this tiny ship? Who knows? Anyway, that's the movie. Overall, not good. It's a movie that I liked well enough as a kid, but the more times I've watched it, the more it annoys me. And it's a shame because there are some decent ideas and themes in this movie. About time, aging, that sort of thing. But it does not come together with any kind of cohesion. I mean, the Nexus makes no sense at all. What happens to your body when you're in the Nexus? How does it work? None of it is explained. And please, don't tell me about the novelization. I'm sure there's more details and there may be things in it that make more sense, but the movie should not rely on an outside source in order for it to make sense. It should just make sense. And then a novel can expand on that. I mean, the last thing I feel like doing when I watch a movie that I don't really like is homework. Like, I have to do like research to find out if there's any way this movie could be good. And it's weird because as I was watching this movie for this video, it really started to remind me of Star Wars: The Last Jedi in a lot of different ways. You know, you have an aging hero reluctantly returning to save the day and ultimately dying a very unsatisfying death. The only real difference is that Kirk never comes off as a sad, pathetic mope who drinks antifreeze right out of some space cow's fat tits. And both of those movies end as though something uplifting or inspirational just happened, and that's just not what occurred in the actual movies. I mean, in Generations, we lose Kirk, we lose the Enterprise, Picard loses his entire family. I mean, this is not a happy ending. And not that it has to be a happy ending, but I wish the movie wouldn't pretend like it is. That's all I'm saying. I mean, Kirk's death is almost a joke. Instead of a captain on the bridge, it's a bridge on the captain. I mean, his apparent death on the Enterprise B was better than his actual death at the end of the movie, in my opinion anyway. And Data's emotion chip gets annoying after a while as well. One minute he's borderline distraught about his failure to help Geordi. The next minute he loves scanning for life forms. Now granted that happened after they rescued Geordi, so maybe he was feeling relief, but it just comes off as a little bit inconsistent. He's kind of all over the place. And I think they handled his emotion chip a lot better in Star Trek First Contact. And Soren as the villain is just nothing. He's just a mad scientist who basically wants to live happily ever after in a fairy tale. And he doesn't care how many people he kills along the way. It's very one-dimensional. And his plan is like Swiss cheese. None of it makes sense. It's just a total mess. And the writers of this movie were Brannon Braga and Ronald D. Moore. Great Star Trek writers. And they know that this movie has problems. Every time they talk about it, you can hear the frustration in their voice. Big part of the problem was that they wrote the movie at the same time that they wrote the finale of Next Generation, which is kind of insane and understandable that one of those things turned out to be kind of a disaster. And the other one turned out to be one of the best Star Trek episodes of all time. Anyway, I should probably wrap this shit up, don't you think? I mean, Jesus, I would not shut up about this movie. Needless to say, it's not my favorite Star Trek movie. It's not my least favorite, but it's definitely close to the bottom. But let me know what you think of Star Trek Generations. And until next time, take it easy.
Well, it looks like he hates it.
Yes, that is it. I hate this.
David, I think the chip is working.
Oh, yes. I hate this. It is revolting.
More?
Please.